And well, this just in, a breaking development that we're bringing to all our viewers. Iran's Mehr News has now reported that an American military base, this base situated in Syria, has now come under attack. US military base in Syria has come under attack. What would this now mean in the diplomatic and the escalation that is churning in the West Asian crisis? News 9's Deputy Managing Editor Kartike Sharma joins us on the broadcast here. Kartike, about 40,000 United States troops that are stationed across West Asia, 19 different military bases. 15 of these have been operational for the last 15 years. And the biggest point that Pete Hegseth, the US Defense Secretary, had also said was that, well, Iran knows better than not attacking US bases. What might this now lead to next?
You see, we have to understand that what has the Iranians done. Iranians have struck at a U.S. military base in Deir ez-Zor, which is the eastern Syria. Now, Deir ez-Zor is in the eastern part of Syria, which comprises of Al Omar oil field. Now, Al Omar oil field is the, if I would say, the biggest oil field, largest oil field in Syria. Americans don't claim this as an open military base. Americans in Syria have a covert clandestine presence. Their presence is not even declared to United Nations that they're operating in Syria. And Syrians complain that they are stealing oil from the Syrian eastern province. So if Iranians have hit the American base near Al Omar oil field, it means that they have also stuck basically the oil infrastructure of the Americans. So there are two things at the play. First, it's Deir ez-Zor, which used to be a stronghold of ISIS. Second, this part is not controlled by the Syrian government because Americans are there. Americans control this oil field, which is known by the name Al Omar, which is the largest Syrian oil field. And the Syrian government has been saying that the Americans are not letting go of it and stealing American oil. So it's a big issue if the Americans are hit there, because then Americans can obviously use it as a reason to.
No, but Kartike, what happens if this attack has been carried out by Iran-backed proxies or Iran sympathizers, Iran-backed militias, and not Tehran themselves? Would that mean some sort of difference in the kind of attack or retaliation that might come across from the White House?
Yes, there might be a retaliation from White House in case there is a casualty in Al-Shams oil field. I doubt that the secret base of the Americans would be near the oil installation of the Americans. They must have kept a distance, because any strategic base which is near oil installation can cause larger damage. So I'm sure that that is not the case. But yes, I can definitely say that if Iranians are hitting Americans with the Syrian bases, it tells me a bigger strategy. They will be taking Americans by surprise. Americans have got 38 bases in West Asia. I'm not including Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. There are 2 air bases in Turkey, but Americans have got air bases in Saudi Arabia. They've got air bases in Syria. They've got air bases in Lebanon. They've got air bases in Jordan. They've got air bases in UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and Djibouti. So, see, it's Americans, or the American government is the only country, whose air base and naval air base or the army air base dot the entire globe. No one has that wherewithal. From Diego Garcia to, you name the world and they'll have an air base there. They have assets to mobilize their military power to dominate. So they have a lot to protect, which means that they would be rotating out their aircrafts and important military infrastructure. But I would say Iran does not have the wherewithal to carry on this strike any longer. I don't think they have this wherewithal. They can fire randomly. They can, they can destroy a plane here and there. But I don't think, the Iranians have the wherewithal, because any of these understand that their radar infrastructure has been degraded by Israelis. They do not have the capacity to defend themselves. Yes, they can fire all the 3,000 ballistic missiles then what will happen, Kabir? And as war expert says, that any conflict is defined by the limit of your offensive and defensive weapons. So I think the Israelis must have reached the limits of their defensive weapon defined by Iron Dome system, and Iranis must have been also
Kartikeya,
and they have exhausted their offensive weapons like ballistic missiles.
Kartikeya, if I may, and before we let you go, this is not one of the notable U.S. air bases in West Asia. This is not the Al Udeid air base that's situated in Qatar. Neither is this the Bahrain Fifth Fleet of the U.S. Naval, their headquarters. Neither is this Camp Arif Jan in Kuwait, the UAE air base, that's Al Dafra, and the ones that you pointed out too as well. But what does this mean about the negotiation talks? Because the global objective at this point in time seems to be that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. But that means that requires deliberation, that requires a discussion, a discourse, diplomatic churning. But these attacks, and now United States officially entering with the B-2 bombing, their bases coming under attack, aren't the global powers pushing Tehran away from that negotiating table?
They have already pushed Tehran away from the negotiating table. Their nuclear installations have been completely degraded. Iran has all the reasons to feel upset with Russia and China also. But they have their constraints. Russia is completely involved in Ukraine. Chinese have got their eye on Taiwan. 70% of the Chinese oil trade is through the Strait of Hormuz. So I really don't think Chinese are going to get involved like that. Bottom line is that what will happen in case the Hormuz choke take place? If the Hormuz is choked, then we have a big problem. Hitting a army base here or army base there is not going to be a big problem. The big problem is if American casualties take place, if a senior American officer dies, or else Americans will be much happy by taking these missiles and saying, well, we are not going to react. Because what Americans have done, I think they expect a little pushback.
That's absolutely, pertinent questions that have now come to the fore. We'll have to wait for some more reports on this front, but Iran's Mehr News now reporting that a U.S. base in Syria has come under attack. Whose attack? Well, that's a big question at this point in time, but all those pertinent points that Kartikeya just raised about the closure of the Hormuz Strait and what would this now mean in terms of fresh escalation after the B-2 bombings on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran and retaliation coming from Iran, not just on Haifa and Israel, but Iran-backed militias attacking U.S. bases. Some more clarity that is required on that particular front, but needless to say, a deadlier turn that this West Asian crisis has now taken. Let's continue to decode what the 11th day of the West Asian crisis here has in store for us.
ईरान ने इजराइल पर मिसाइल दाग दिए हैं। इस वक्त सायरन बज रहा है और इस वक्त देखिए कि सभी लोग सुरक्षित बंकर की तरफ भाग रहे हैं। माय गॉड मैं जहां पर खड़ा हूं इधर मैं जहां पर खड़ा हूं वहां पर भी भयानक हमले हुए। ये देखिए रोहित, अगर आप दिखा रहे होंगे, ये देखिए धाम जहां पर मैं खड़ा हूं वहां पर ये देखिए आपको लगातार ये देखिए।
Well, sirens echoed across Haifa and Jerusalem on Monday, the 11th day of the conflict, as Iran launched a fresh wave of missiles and drone attacks on Israel. Now, in the 11th day of this escalating air war that began on the 13th of June, it was a Friday. The latest barrage came just days after the U.S. strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, prompting Tehran's promised retaliation. And Israeli civilians were seen rushing to shelters in Haifa, where impacts were earlier reported. Now, Iran's Revolutionary Guards have claimed that they had altered their attack strategy, striking across a wide arc right from Tel Aviv to Haifa. Now, whilst casualty reports, they remain unclear, the intensity marks a dangerous new phase in this regional conflict. President Donald Trump has warned that the strikes may trigger a regime change in Iran as well. Well, Iran on Monday also issued a stern warning to the United States. Speaking on state television, Armed Forces spokesman Ibrahim Zolfaghari declared that the fighters of the Islamic Republic will inflict serious, unpredictable consequences on the United States.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم و عدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة و من رباط الخیل ترهبون به عدو الله و عدوکم. آمریکای جنایتکار در ادامه حمایت‌های همه جانبه خود از تجاوزگری رژیم صهیونیستی با نقض آشکار حاکمیت جمهوری اسلامی ایران به صورت مستقیم وارد جنگ با ایران شد و به خاک مقدس ایران تجاوز کرد. این اقدام خصمانه با هدف احیای رژیم در حال مرگ صهیونیستی صورت گرفت، اما نه تنها بی ثمر بود، بلکه موجب گسترش دایره اهداف مشروع و متنوع نیروهای مسلح جمهوری اسلامی ایران خواهد شد و زمینه‌های گسترش جنگ در منطقه را فراهم می‌کند. به شما اطمینان می‌دهیم که با این تجاوز عقربه‌های ساعت به سود شما نخواهد چرخید. رزمندگان اسلام در پاسخ به این جنایت با عملیات‌های قدرتمند و هدفمند عواقبی سنگین، پشیمان کننده و غیر قابل پیش بینی برای شما رقم خواهند زد. ان شاء الله. Gambler Trump, you can start this war, but we will be the ones who end it.
Well, America's B-2 stealth bombers soaring through the skies, a presidential bluff that came in just a couple of hours before that, and a well-executed deception mission. The United States called it Operation Midnight Hammer, the most audacious U.S. airstrike plan in West Asia in decades, and at the center of it, President Donald Trump. For days, Donald Trump played it coy, telling the world he would decide within the next 2 weeks whether to strike Iran or not. And in reality, the plan was already underway. From the Whitman Air Force Base in Missouri, 7 B-2 bombers flew across the Atlantic, refueling multiple times before targeting Iran's key nuclear sites at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. America's B-2 stealth bombers soaring through the skies, a presidential bluff, and of course, President Donald Trump right at the center of it all. A U.S. Navy submarine also fired cruise missiles into Isfahan, confirming naval support in the region. The graphics on your screen shows how the attack was plotted and executed. A full spectrum display of air, sea, and psychological warfare. This was Donald Trump's way of entering the conflict quietly, forcefully, and on his own terms. The diversion tactics that took place, the naval support, and Operation Midnight Hammer, attacking Iran's 3 nuclear sites. Well, now, the Israeli military says it attacked 6 Iranian air bases in western, eastern, and central Iran. The IDF attacked launch and storage on storage facilities for surface-to-surface missiles aimed at the territory of Israel. More than 15 Air Force fighter jets were attacked with precise intelligence guidance from the Intelligence Directorate in the Kermanshah region of Iran, destroying several launch and storage sites for surface-to-surface missiles aimed at Israel. The IDF continues to intensify its attacks on the Iranian regime's military capabilities and will continue to work to achieve air superiority, says the IDF, in order to maintain the security of the State of Israel. Well, now my colleague Manish Jha, he's been in Israel bringing us live reports of what the situation on the ground was. We'd earlier asked him to run for cover as the sirens started blaring, and you could clearly see explosions taking place quite near him in his vicinity. He earlier spoke to a member of the opposition of the Knesset in Israel to better understand what the political roadmap and spectrum has to say when you're talking about the US now officially entering this war. Take a listen.
Everyone would like to know that what opposition party are also saying about this war, whether they are in support with government or not. So first of all, please tell me, what is your assessment about the current situation? How it is going? Is it was necessary or not?
First of all, thank you for having me. This war has been imposed on us since October 7th, almost 2 years ago. And a week ago, we had to go to war with Iran because there is no other choice. Now, I'm a member of the opposition, so there is no question that I have some disagreements with this government. But when it comes to the war with Iran, there is no disagreement. Iran poses an existential threat to the state of Israel. And this war is justified, and therefore we support the government with a decision to go into this war. I think the entire opposition stood together against this war and are supporting it. We have to understand that nuclear weapons are threatening the state of Israel. We cannot have Iran be a nuclear state, and of course the ballistic missiles which they were producing in very high speed is also an existential threat to the state of Israel, and we cannot afford that. And therefore I think the entire people of Israel are in full support of this cause. And when it comes to our internal politics, we can hash that out later after we finish the war with Iran.
You have rightly mentioned, and because I have also noticed that I'm coming here for last 3 years, and earlier I used to see lots of protests, especially after October 7th. But now I didn't find any big protest, or in that matter, any good number of people are protesting that no, we don't need war. So what is the reason behind it?
Well, first of all, don't forget this is a democratic state, and the right to demonstrate is of course there. But during this war, we've been having sirens and ballistic missiles being fired at the state of Israel every hour or so, and we've been running to shelters, the entire population of the state of Israel. And so right now, when it comes to the security of the people of Israel, it's more important than demonstrating. Therefore, the people are doing what our Ministry of Defense is ordering them to do, and we're staying safe close to our shelters, and that's the reason why we don't see demonstrations. But the demonstrations are mainly because of the Gaza war and the situation since October 7th. When it comes to Iran, I think that we're all in agreement that we must eliminate the nuclear threat from Iran, and of course the ballistic missiles as well.
Meanwhile, in a high-stakes diplomatic exchange, Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Moscow, reaffirming Russia's support for Tehran amid the escalating tensions with US and Israel. And during the meeting, President Putin declared that Russia's position on the current events has already been conveyed through its foreign ministry. Calling the recent aggression against Iran groundless, Putin added, and I quote, "We are trying to help the Iranian people," I unquote. He emphasized that the meeting offers a chance to explore solutions to the current crisis and extended his best wishes to Iran's president and the supreme leader. On his part, Araghchi hit out at Washington and Tel Aviv, calling their actions illegitimate. He expressed gratitude to Russia, saying, "We thank our Russian friends for condemning these actions. Russia is on the right side of history." Abbas Araghchi also conveyed the greetings of Iran's supreme leader and the president to Vladimir Putin. Listen in to what Abbas Araghchi had to say after the meet.
Consultations between Iran and Russia have always existed. On every issue, we have worked closely together, held discussions, and coordinated our positions. Given the current special circumstances in the region, it is only natural that our consultations are now more precise, more serious, and closer. My trip had been planned in advance to come here after Istanbul and meet with Mr. Putin to discuss the Israeli aggression and other regional threats, which, of course, have now also involved an American attack. Given the new attack that has been carried out against the Islamic Republic of Iran, It is natural that our discussions will now be more serious and cover broader dimensions. This is an act of aggression and an attack that must be unequivocally condemned. We appreciate Russia's stance in condemning this assault in the strongest possible terms today, and we hope it will be accompanied by practical support in the Security Council. The attack carried out by the United States is first and foremost an attack on the UN Charter, as it is entirely in violation of it. It is an attack on international law, an attack on legal norms and frameworks, and most importantly, an attack on the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, and the non-proliferation regime as a whole.
Now, amidst this escalating tensions, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev's statement has left the global leaders guessing Iran's next move. After the Operation Midnight Hammer by the US, which targeted the nuclear sites in Iran, Russia has issued a stern warning saying that a number of countries are now prepared to supply Iran with nuclear warheads after the American strikes. In a series of posts on X, Medvedev said that the US operation targeting sites in Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordo had not only failed to achieve its objective, but had in fact produced the opposite result. Medvedev further asked, what did the Americans accomplish with their nighttime strikes on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, he questioned. He claimed that the critical infrastructure of the nuclear fuel cycle appears to have remained unaffected or sustained only minor damages. Issuing a warning to the US, Medvedev added that the enrichment of nuclear material and the future production of nuclear weapons will continue as Iran's political regime survived and has come out even stronger. Russia considers the strikes to have only helped Iran consolidate domestic support, and people were now rallying around Iran's spiritual leadership, including those who were previously indifferent or opposed to it. Russia, in a statement, said that the United States has now become entangled in a new conflict, with prospects of a ground operation looming on the horizon as well. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has raised the question of regime change in Iran following the US strikes against key military sites over the weekend, as senior officials in his administration warned Tehran against any kind of retaliation. Regime change by Donald Trump. Here's a complete report.
US President Donald Trump on Sunday raised the question of regime change in Iran following US strikes against 3 key nuclear sites in the country over the weekend. Trump wrote on Truth Social Sunday afternoon that, quote, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?" That appeared to be a departure from messaging from top officials in his administration. Earlier in the day at a press conference at the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the U.S. strikes in Iran were not a preamble to overthrow its government.
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
And in a Sunday interview on NBC's Meet the Press with Kristen Welker, Vice President J.D. Vance took a similar line to Hegseth on the question of regime change.
Well, first of all, we don't want to achieve regime change. We want to achieve the end of the Iranian nuclear program, John. That's America's objective, and that's what the president has set us out to do.
U.S. General Dan Kane said Operation Midnight Hammer involved 7 B-2 bombers, which flew for 18 hours from the United States into Iran to launch 75 precision-guided munitions in total on 3 nuclear sites. Tehran has vowed to defend itself. After the U.S. strikes, it traded more volleys of missiles with Israel that wounded scores of people and destroyed buildings in the commercial hub of Tel Aviv. But it has not yet targeted U.S. military bases or choked off oil shipments that pass through its waters. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Sunday no more U.S. strikes were planned unless Iran responded. In an interview on CBS, he said, quote, "We have other targets we can hit, but we achieved our objective. There are no planned military operations right now against Iran unless they mess around."
Well, we were earlier talking about the Hormuz Strait and how its closure could be detrimental for the entire global oil supply chain. Iran's parliament has approved a proposal to close the Strait of Hormuz, that critical global oil corridor, in a major escalation of tensions in the region and raising fears of severe disruption to global energy supplies. The final decision now rests with Iran's Supreme National Security Council, and according to state media reports, the move came in the aftermath of the U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites at Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan. Revolutionary Guard Corps commander and senior lawmaker Ismail Kosari said the closure is on the agenda and will be done whenever necessary. Now, the decision, if approved, will be catastrophic for oil-dependent economies. A closure would send shockwaves through the global markets, affecting everything from transport costs to food prices. While it is not the first time Iran has threatened to close the Hormuz Strait, but after the U.S. attacks, it is weighing its options, needless to say. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is a strategic maritime choke point through which nearly 20% of global oil and gas shipments pass daily. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea and is just 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. The 3-kilometer wide shipping lane in each direction. The closure could impact major oil exporters, including Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait, and Iran itself, as well as top importers like China and India. And for India, about 2 million barrels per day of crude transits this very strait, the world's most important and crucial choke point, the Hormuz Strait. Satellite images that we've received just today from Monday, the 23rd of June, it shows the ongoing tanker traffic movement in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's parliament has approved a move to close the Strait of Hormuz that leads into the Gulf, which would require approval from the Supreme National Security Council, a body led by an appointee of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Attempting to strangle the strait could send global oil prices skyrocketing, derail the world economy, and invite conflict with U.S. Navy's massive Fifth Fleet that patrols the Gulf from its base in Bahrain. The Strait of Hormuz lies between Oman and Iran and is the primary export route for oil producers such as Saudi, UAE, Iraq, Kuwait. And reacting on this development, Union Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas, Hardeep Singh Puri, said that India had diversified the sources of supply, and out of the 5.5 million barrels of crude oil that the country consumes daily, about 1.5 to 2 million come through the Straits of Hormuz.
Today is concerned, the escalation of tensions in the Middle East was not entirely unexpected. In fact, we had foreshadowed this escalation, and the government under the Honorable Prime Minister has been consistently and periodically reviewing the situation, including the possibility of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. And as I have mentioned earlier, we had diversified the sources of supply, and out of the 5.5 million barrels of crude oil that India consumes daily, about 1.5 and 2 million only come through the Straits of Hormuz. We import roughly 4 million barrels through other routes, and our companies, the oil marketing companies, have enough stocks. Most of them have stocks up to 3 weeks. One of them has, in fact, 25 days stocks. And we are also confident that we can increase the supply of crude through other routes.